Bad leadership can wreak havoc on societies, leading to widespread suffering, economic turmoil, and even war. It's a universal truth that resonates through the corridors of time, from the ancient kingdoms to the modern democracies. Unfit leaders, be they monarchs, presidents, or dictators, have the power to shape the destiny of their nations, often with catastrophic results. They may rise to power with promises of prosperity, peace, and progress, but their actions often tell quite a different story. We'll be exploring the devastating impacts of bad leadership through the lens of 10 leaders whose reigns were marked by mismanagement, human rights abuses, and sometimes outright tyranny. Their legacies, stained by the pain and suffering of their people, serve as stark reminders of the devastating potential of poor leadership. From Idi Amin's reign of terror in Uganda to Mao Zedong's catastrophic Great Leap Forward in China, these leaders have left indelible marks on history. Let us delve into the lives of these leaders, starting from the earliest to the most recent. Our journey begins with Stephen and Ivan the Terrible, leaders from the medieval era who left their respective societies in chaos. Let's first turn to England in the 12th century, where King Stephen's reign was marked by disorder and lawlessness. His contested claim to the throne sparked a brutal civil war that lasted for 15 long years, an era aptly known as the Anarchy. Under Stephen's rule, England was gripped by instability and suffering. Stephen's inability to maintain order and his failure to effectively govern during this tumultuous period made him a prime example of poor leadership. Now, let's journey east to 16th century Russia, where we encounter Ivan the Terrible. As the first Tsar of all Russia, Ivan's rule was anything but peaceful. He was known for his brutal repression and paranoia, often targeting the nobility with violent purges. His erratic and often cruel behavior sowed fear and discord among his subjects, leading to internal strife and instability. The reign of Ivan the Terrible was a time of terror and suffering for the Russian people, a stark reminder of the devastating effects of poor leadership. These early examples of poor leadership show us how the actions and decisions of those in power can have far-reaching consequences. From the chaos of King Stephen's England to the fear and repression under Ivan the Terrible, the impact of ineffective and destructive leadership can resonate through the ages. As we move forward in time, we find more examples of leaders who caused immense suffering. Thomas Jefferson and James Buchanan, while known for their contributions to American history, also had significant failures. Let's start with Jefferson. He's often celebrated for his pivotal role in shaping the United States' democratic ideals. But there's a glaring contradiction in his leadership. Despite penning the immortal words, "All men are created equal," Jefferson was a slave owner. He held hundreds of people in bondage, directly contradicting the very principles of freedom he championed. This aspect of Jefferson's life casts a long shadow over his legacy, reminding us that even those who contribute significantly to the progress of society can also perpetuate its most deep-seated injustices. Then we have James Buchanan, the 15th President of the United States. His presidency is marred by his failure to address the simmering tensions over slavery that were tearing the nation apart. Buchanan, instead of using his position to effect change, chose to appease the southern states. His lack of decisive leadership during this critical period in American history only served to exacerbate the divisions. His inaction and inability to navigate the country through this crisis contributed significantly to the outbreak of the Civil War, a devastating conflict that claimed the lives of over 600,000 Americans. These two figures, Jefferson and Buchanan, serve as reminders that leadership is not just about rhetoric and lofty ideals. It's about actions and decisions that can either uphold or undermine the very principles a leader claims to stand for. Their failures underline the complexities of leadership and the profound impact it can have on society. While these leaders left a mixed legacy, others on our list are infamous for their disastrous reigns. The 20th century saw some of the most destructive leaders in history, from dictators like Adolf Hitler and Idi Amin to a president like Herbert Hoover. Starting with Adolf Hitler, his dictatorship in Nazi Germany led to the genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of other persecuted groups during the Holocaust. Hitler's racist ideology and aggressive expansionist policies brought the world to its knees during World War II, causing unprecedented suffering and devastation. His reign was marked by a toxic blend of extreme nationalism, anti-Semitism, and authoritarianism, giving rise to one of the darkest periods in human history. Then there was Idi Amin, whose rule in Uganda was synonymous with rampant human rights abuses, economic mismanagement, and widespread suffering. His regime was characterized by a ruthless suppression of dissent, leading to the death of hundreds of thousands of Ugandans. Amin's unbridled lust for power, coupled with his disregard for the rule of law, culminated in a reign of terror that left a permanent scar on the nation's psyche. And we can't forget about Herbert Hoover, the 31st President of the United States. Despite his successful career as a businessman and humanitarian, Hoover's presidency was marred by his failure to effectively address the Great Depression. His reluctance to intervene in the economy and his misguided policies only worsened the suffering of millions of Americans. He was widely criticized for his lack of empathy and his inability to comprehend the depth of the crisis, tarnishing his legacy as a leader. These leaders, each in their own way, epitomize the devastation that can result from poor leadership. Their actions led to human rights abuses, economic collapse, and widespread suffering. They used their power to serve their own interests, rather than the welfare of their people. Yet even these leaders pale in comparison to those who came in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Their failures serve as a stark reminder of the importance of good leadership and the dire consequences of its absence. In the contemporary era, leaders like Omar al-Bashir, Donald Trump, and Mao Zedong have left indelible marks on their societies. Omar al-Bashir's reign in Sudan was a reign of terror. His time in power was marked by human rights abuses, corruption, and a devastating civil war. The conflict, largely fueled by his leadership, led to the deaths of over 1 million people and left a lasting legacy of destruction and suffering. Al-Bashir's rule was a textbook example of how a leader can plunge a nation into chaos. Then we have Donald Trump. His presidency in the United States was characterized by chaos and divisiveness. His failure to effectively lead during critical times, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, further deepened the country's divisions. His tenure was also marked by numerous constitutional crises that threatened the very fabric of American democracy. Trump's presidency serves as a stark example of how a leader can sow discord and undermine democratic norms. And lastly, we have Mao Zedong. His reign in China during the Great Leap Forward was one of the deadliest man-made disasters in history. Mao's misguided policies resulted in mass starvation and death on a catastrophic scale, with tens of millions of Chinese citizens perishing as a result. His reign of terror and incompetence left a legacy of unparalleled suffering and devastation in China. The consequences of his leadership continue to reverberate in the country today. These leaders, in their own ways, have all demonstrated a disregard for human rights, an inability to effectively govern, and a propensity for causing division and conflict. Their leadership, or lack thereof, has led to immense suffering and hardship for their respective societies. These leaders serve as a stark reminder of the importance of good leadership. It's not just about holding a position of power, but about how that power is wielded. The impact of their failures continues to be felt, serving as a potent reminder of the devastating consequences of poor leadership. The devastation caused by these leaders underscores the critical role of effective, compassionate leadership. We've journeyed through history, from the reigns of ancient monarchs to the presidencies of modern times, witnessing the havoc that can be wreaked when leadership fails. We've seen how misplaced policies, neglect of human rights, inability to handle crises, and sheer incompetence can lead to suffering on a staggering scale. It's clear that leadership is not just about holding a position of power, it's about making decisions that prioritize the well-being of the people. It's about having the foresight to steer society towards progress, not regression. And it's about embodying the values we hold dear, like justice, equality, and respect for all. Our history is littered with the scars of poor leadership, but it's also rich with lessons we can learn from. As we move forward, let us strive to learn from the mistakes of the past and seek leaders who will guide us towards a better future.